The moment Judge Judy entered the courtroom, the air changed. It always did. Conversation stopped. Papers froze mid-slide. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to lower itself in deference to the presence of the woman who had ruled this courtroom like a fortress for decades. Her black robe swayed slightly as she walked, gavel tucked firmly in one hand, eyes scanning the room with that trademark razor-sharp precision. Every attorney knew what that look meant. No games, no nonsense, no second chances. But in the very front row sat a woman who clearly believed none of that applied to her. She was easy to spot. No mask, no hesitation, no hint of fear. While everyone else sat with quiet posture and fixed expressions, she leaned back in her seat like she owned it. Arms folded across her chest, chin lifted as if daring anyone to correct her. She didn't look nervous. She looked bored, almost amused, as though she'd come not to observe the proceedings but to challenge them. The bailiff noticed her first. He stepped forward just enough to catch her attention and spoke in the steady, professional tone that always carried a warning underneath. "Ma'am," he said, "you'll need to wear a mask while inside the courtroom." Her response was instantaneous and dripping with contempt. She didn't even look at him. Instead, she let out a sharp laugh and muttered loudly enough for half the room to hear, "This is America, not a dictatorship." A ripple of unease moved through the benches. Eyes darted toward the bench where Judge Judy was flipping through her notes. But Judy wasn't just reading. She never just read. Even as she turned pages, her gaze flickered across the room like a silent hawk, registering everything. She had seen the smirk. She had heard the muttered defiance. And now she was watching. For a few tense minutes, the proceedings stumbled forward. Attorneys delivered opening remarks in clipped, cautious voices. Legal documents slid across polished desks with soft thuds. But the atmosphere was strange, tight, strained, like a room holding its breath. Because while the trial was supposed to be the focus, everyone's attention kept flicking toward the woman in the front row. She sighed dramatically. She whispered sarcastic comments about fake rules to anyone close enough to hear. She rolled her eyes so aggressively it was practically performance art. And it was performance. That was the dangerous part. This wasn't quiet defiance. This was spectacle. A woman trying to make herself the star of Judge Judy's courtroom. Then Judy spoke. "Ma'am," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "In my courtroom, you will follow the rules. Do you understand?" The woman smirked, a tiny mocking smile that could have ignited gasoline. "You can't make me," she replied, her tone dripping with arrogance. The silence that followed was so absolute it rang in people's ears. The bailiff froze. The court reporter's fingers hovered above her keys. Even the attorneys looked stunned, and for a heartbeat, the woman seemed to believe she had won, that her defiance had somehow placed her above Judge Judy's authority. She was wrong. Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply lifted her hand and gave the smallest nod. The bailiff moved instantly, like a storm breaking through still air. He gave one last warning, firm and final. The woman rolled her eyes again, muttering something about tyranny, and that was it. In 36 seconds, the room witnessed a transformation so swift it was almost unreal. The woman who had walked in laughing was now being dragged out, heels scraping across the floor, arms flailing as her shouts collapsed into panicked sputters. The same courtroom she had tried to command now stared at her like she was nothing more than a disruption being removed, because that's exactly what she had become. And through it all, Judge Judy never flinched. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even blink. She simply watched her bailiffs escort the chaos out of her courtroom, her gaze steady and unshaken. When the door finally slammed shut behind the woman, Judy calmly turned the page of her notes as though nothing had happened at all. The audience sat frozen in their seats, stunned and silent, trying to process what they had just witnessed. They had expected drama. Judge Judy's court was famous for it. But this was something else entirely. This was swift, decisive, absolute authority, and everyone knew without a doubt that something much bigger had just been set in motion. Because what Judge Judy did next would shock them even more. Before we dive into this explosion and the fallout it unleashed, hit that subscribe button and tell us where you're watching from. Because this courtroom clash is only getting started. When that woman locked eyes with Judge Judy and said, "You can't make me," she had no idea what she'd just set in motion. In that instant, the mask on her face stopped mattering. What mattered was the principle she was trying to shatter, the unspoken rule that keeps every courtroom standing: respect. Without it, the walls may as well crumble into dust, and Judge Judy knew it. For most people, courtrooms are intimidating: the echoing wood panels, the sharp crack of the gavel, the feeling that truth and consequence are sitting just inches away. People lower their voices, straighten their posture, and speak carefully because they understand the gravity of the place. But this woman came in believing she could bend the gravity, that she could walk into the house of order and drag chaos in by the arm, and that's why this wasn't just about her. It was about what her defiance represented, and what would happen if it went unanswered. Because if she could mock Judge Judy and walk away smiling, it would send a message that the courtroom is nothing more than a stage, and the loudest person can rewrite the script. That respect is optional. That authority is negotiable. That rules apply only to the people too timid to break them. That is the threat Judy was staring down. And it wasn't small. It wasn't just this courtroom watching. It was the audience beyond the cameras, the millions who tune in to watch justice in motion. Judge Judy has always been more than a person. She is an institution, a symbol, the embodiment of discipline carved into human form. And institutions can't afford cracks because cracks become precedents. The woman likely thought it was just a mask rule, but Judy knew better. Courtrooms are not ruled by masks or policies. They are ruled by the idea that no individual stands higher than the system. The second that idea falters, everything inside collapses. Judy understood what was really at stake. If she stayed silent, this moment would metastasize. It would echo across clips and headlines and social feeds. People would point and say, if she got away with it, why can't I? Disorder would become entertainment. Entitlement would become contagious. And the court would lose something far more valuable than decorum. It would lose legitimacy. But if she acted, if she responded with the full weight of the authority she carried, she could prove something just as powerful. That respect is not a suggestion, and it's a requirement. That arrogance doesn't outweigh order. That defiance doesn't outshine discipline. This wasn't a clash between two personalities. It was a collision between two worlds, entitlement versus accountability. The woman saw herself as a rebel, a fighter against rules she believed didn't apply to her. Judy saw her for what she was, a threat to the very structure of justice. Because once a courtroom becomes a place where rules are negotiable, justice stops being blind. It becomes deaf. It stops hearing facts and starts rewarding noise. That was the line Judy was standing on, and she had no intention of letting it blur. Everyone else in the room felt it too. The attorneys who sat frozen, the court reporter who stopped typing, even the audience members who had come expecting light drama now sat rigid, their faces pale, realizing they might be witnessing something far heavier. This wasn't just a disruptive woman. This was a test of whether Judge Judy's authority still meant something, a test of whether decades of courtroom order could still hold against a single voice screaming rebellion, a test of whether chaos could be allowed to win. And if Judy lost that test, even for 1 second, she wouldn't just lose control of her courtroom. She would lose the foundation it stood on. That was what was really at stake, and that's why, as the silence in the room grew heavier and the woman smirked from her front row seat, Judy's eyes stayed locked on her. Not with anger, not with fear, but with the calm, unblinking certainty of someone who understood she was about to defend far more than a mask rule. She was about to defend the very meaning of the gavel in her hand. To understand why this confrontation struck the room like a lightning bolt, you have to understand who was holding the gavel. Judge Judy wasn't just another judge. She was the judge. For decades, she'd been the final word in courtrooms where arrogance came to die. To millions watching at home, she was the embodiment of what the justice system should be: swift, sharp, and utterly immune to theatrics. Her rise wasn't accidental. Long before she became a television icon, Judith Sheindlin ruled over New York's family court like an iron spine wrapped in black robes. While other judges were buried under endless paperwork, she was carving through case backlogs at triple speed, wielding her wit like a scalpel. Attorneys who entered her courtroom quickly learned there were only two ways to survive: come prepared or get demolished. She had no tolerance for excuses, theatrics, or self-pity, especially self-pity. She could dismantle an argument in seconds, not with volume but with precision. each word clipped, cold, and final. That reputation only grew when she stepped into the spotlight. The world expected TV judges to entertain. Judy refused. She didn't perform for applause, she performed for order. And yet somehow the blunt force of her honesty became entertainment anyway. People didn't watch her because she was charming. They watched because she was fearless, because she said the things other judges only thought, because she didn't just enforce rules, she embodied them. Over time, her courtroom became more than a stage. It became a sanctuary of structure, where facts ruled over feelings. Where respect wasn't requested, it was demanded. People walked through those doors knowing there was no room for chaos here, no space for disrespect to breathe. That was the quiet agreement everyone made with her. You behave or you leave. There was no middle ground. And that is exactly why this maskless woman's defiance was so dangerous. Because Judge Judy's authority wasn't held together by force. It was held together by belief. The belief that everyone, no matter who they were or what they thought of her, would obey the same rules once they stood under her gaze. Break that belief and the whole foundation shudders. That was what Judy was protecting when she looked at that woman. Not pride, not ego, legacy. Because Judge Judy has spent her entire career proving one truth. The courtroom is not a place where you rise by being loud. It's a place where you rise by respecting the law. And the moment someone forgets that, she reminds them, quickly, brutally, and without a shred of hesitation. Long before she walked into Judge Judy's courtroom, that woman had built her entire world on one belief, that rules were for other people. To her, rules weren't guides, they were obstacles. Barriers meant to be broken, walls meant to be climbed, proof that she was braver than the sheep who followed them. And when the world changed and when masks, mandates, and safety protocols became part of daily life, she didn't see them as protections. She saw them as chains. Chains she would never wear. She became a self-declared warrior of personal freedom, armed not with facts or legal understanding, but with slogans and sound bites. She prowled grocery store aisles filming confrontations with employees who asked her to mask up. She barked at flight attendants about constitutional rights she couldn't name. And every time someone told her, "Ma'am, those are the rules," she heard something else. "Prove you're above them." So she did, loudly, theatrically, and often. By the time she showed up in Judy's courtroom, she had already gone viral on social media circles that worshipped defiance. Clips of her shouting down store managers had racked up thousands of views. In her mind, she wasn't disruptive. She was a crusader, a symbol of resistance standing tall while the world bent. People online called her fearless. That word became her armor. And like anyone wearing armor, she believed she was untouchable. So when she received her court summons, she didn't feel humbled. She felt excited. This wasn't punishment, it was a stage. A bigger audience. Brighter lights. In her head, this would be her victory lap, the moment she would finally show millions that even Judge Judy couldn't break her. She told friends she planned to make a scene. She even joked about refusing to stand when Judy walked in, as though it were all a performance waiting to happen. And the mask? That was her opening act. She strutted in barefaced, not just ignoring the posted rules, but staring directly at the sign on the wall and smirking. She wanted people to see it. She wanted the tension, the whispers, the cameras turning her way. Every second of defiance fed her sense of control. But what she didn't understand, and what she had never understood, was that control isn't taken by noise. It's earned by discipline. And discipline was the one thing she'd never learned. She mistook fear for respect. She mistook attention for power. And that's why she never saw the danger she was walking into. Because in every other place she had been, volume had been enough. Shouting had been enough. Drama had been enough. But this wasn't a grocery store. This wasn't a parking lot. This was Judge Judy's courtroom, a place where chaos is stripped of its costume and arrogance collapses under the weight of order. She thought she was walking into a stage. She was walking into a reckoning. The tension that had been simmering finally snapped when Karen opened her mouth mid-hearing. Judge Judy was in the middle of addressing the court when the woman let out a loud, exaggerated sigh and muttered, "This is ridiculous. Masks don't even work." The sound cut through the courtroom like a siren. Judy's head turned slowly. Her gaze locked onto the woman's smirk with surgical precision. "Ma'am," Judy said, her voice calm but edged with steel, "You will not interrupt my court." Karen laughed, not nervously, mockingly. "You can't tell me what to wear." "This is a free country." The room froze. No one dared to breathe. The attorneys stopped moving their pens. The bailiff's jaw tightened. Even the court reporter's fingers hovered in midair. Judy's eyes narrowed to slits. "This is not a debate," Judy replied coldly. "This is a courtroom, and in my courtroom you will follow the rules." Karen leaned forward. "And if I don't?" That was it. Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She simply gave a subtle nod. The bailiff moved instantly, stepping forward like a released spring. "Ma'am, you are in contempt of court," he said firmly. She scoffed. "For not wearing a piece of cloth?" The bailiff didn't answer. He reached for her arm, and in that moment the scene shifted from arrogance to chaos. She jerked back, protesting, shouting about freedom as two more officers closed in. The courtroom gasped as her defiance dissolved into desperation. Within 36 seconds, the self-declared warrior of personal freedom was being dragged out of Judge Judy's courtroom, heels scraping, voice cracking, arms flailing in vain. Judy never blinked. She didn't even watch the struggle. She simply turned back to her notes as if removing disorder was no more remarkable than turning a page. A stunned silence hung in the air. Then the room erupted in a low murmur of disbelief. Everyone had just witnessed the unthinkable. Someone actually testing Judge Judy. And loss, if you believe respect still matters, like this video. And comment order in the court to show whose side you're on. The courtroom was still buzzing long after the door slammed shut behind her. Even people who had sat through years of hearings couldn't quite believe what they'd just seen. The woman who strutted in like she owned the place had been ripped out of it in 36 seconds flat, and Judge Judy hadn't even raised her voice. It was surgical, swift, final. The attorneys exchanged stunned glances. The court reporter quietly resumed typing, her hands trembling slightly. One spectator whispered, "Did that really just happen?" But nobody answered. They were all still watching Judge Judy, who, without missing a beat, was calmly reviewing her notes, as if chaos had been nothing more than background noise. That contrast, her silence versus the woman's spectacle, was what made the moment explode beyond the courtroom walls. Because while Judy went on with the hearing as though nothing had happened, the world outside was about to erupt. It started in whispers, the rustle of smartphones being pulled from pockets as soon as the recess bell rang. Staffers, interns, even attorneys who had sat stone-faced minutes earlier now had their phones held low, thumbs flying across screens. Within minutes, the footage was online. A short clip, the woman shouting, the bailiff stepping forward, Judy unmoving, and the slow, humiliating drag toward the exit. The video didn't just spread, it detonated. By the time the courtroom reconvened, the incident had already hit social media trending lists. Judge Judy doesn't play shot to the top of the platform within an hour. Viewers who had once called the woman brave now called her delusional. Meme pages flooded with screenshots of her being carried out mid-scream, with captions like "Gravity always wins" and "The floor has spoken" mainstream. News outlets picked it up within hours. Morning shows aired the clip on repeat. Commentators debated it as though it were a Supreme Court case. Some tried to frame it as an argument about health mandates. Most didn't bother. They saw what everyone saw, arrogance meeting consequence. And Judy's name was on everyone's lips, even other judges weighed in. One retired federal judge tweeted, "I've seen people removed from court for contempt, but never with that much calm authority. That's why she's Judge Judy." Legal analysts praised her restraint, noting that she didn't escalate or argue. She simply enforced the rule of law and moved on, showing that true authority doesn't need volume. Meanwhile, the woman at the center of the storm tried to fight back online. Hours after being removed, she posted a shaky video claiming she was silenced for speaking truth. But her words were drowned out by the sound of her own heels dragging on the courtroom floor in every replayed clip. Even people who once followed her freedom warrior antics began quietly unfollowing her accounts. Her image as fearless had cracked, and what spilled out wasn't courage. It was chaos. By the second day, late-night comedians were joking about it. Headlines read like punchlines. Order in the court. Judge Judy ends mask meltdown in 36 seconds. Even her hometown paper ran the story with a single word above the fold. Removed. But beneath the laughter was something heavier, something powerful. Because what people really saw in that clip wasn't just a woman being escorted out. They saw what happens when rules finally push back. They saw that order still means something, that respect still has teeth. Law professors started discussing it in lectures. One called it a textbook demonstration of courtroom hierarchy. Bar associations circulated the clip in newsletters as a reminder that decorum is not optional. Even workplace training seminars referenced it in presentations about handling disruption, labeling it the Judge Judy method. And it didn't stop at legal circles. Ordinary viewers felt it too. Comment sections flooded with stories from teachers, flight attendants, retail workers, people who deal with public defiance every day. "I wish I could handle people like that," one teacher wrote. No yelling, no arguing, just done. That was what struck people most, the way Judy did it. Not through anger, not through humiliation, through clarity. Because when that woman mocked the rules, she was trying to rewrite reality. She believed volume could outweigh structure. But Judy reminded the world that structure doesn't shout. It doesn't flinch. It simply endures and erases what refuses to respect it. The woman had walked in believing she was unmovable. Judy moved her, and in doing so, she moved something far bigger. Public faith in the idea that rules still matter, that respect still exists, that arrogance can still lose. By the end of the week, the clip had crossed 100 million views. Major networks replayed it alongside montages of Judy's sharpest moments, declaring it her most legendary ruling yet. The woman disappeared from public view, retreating into silence. Judy didn't mention her again. She didn't have to. The point had been made, and the world had heard it loud and clear, even though Judy never raised her voice. In the days that followed, something remarkable happened. What began as a courtroom disruption transformed into a cultural marker, a reminder that order isn't old-fashioned, it's essential. The clip became more than entertainment. It became evidence that the rules everyone quietly relies on still have defenders who won't flinch when they're tested. Educators played it in classrooms to show how discipline works without cruelty. Corporate trainers referenced it in seminars about controlling chaos. Even parents shared it, saying, "This is how you hold your ground without raising your voice." Judge Judy had turned a meltdown into a masterclass in authority. Meanwhile, the woman who once wore her defiance like a crown vanished from the spotlight she craved. Her followers scattered. Her slogans went silent. Because the truth had become impossible to deny. It wasn't bravery that carried her in. It was ego. And ego doesn't survive in a place where respect still rules. Judge Judy didn't just win an argument. She restored something people feared might be gone. The belief that authority, when grounded in fairness, can still stand taller than noise. And that's why millions can't stop watching that 36-second collapse. Because it wasn't just about a mask. It was about proving that arrogance still breaks against order. Subscribe for more legendary courtroom showdowns, and tell us in the comments what you would have done if you were Judge Judy.